Are you ready to unleash your full potential and become unstoppable in your success and leadership?
Welcome to the Unleashed and Unstoppable podcast, where we provide powerful insights and strategies for coaches, corporate leaders, and entrepreneurs. I'm Alexanne Carter.
And I'm Carol Register, and we're certified master neurocoaches who are passionate about helping you overcome your limiting beliefs and optimize your performance.
Each week, we'll be sharing actionable tips and strategies using neuroscience, from interviews with industry experts to solo episodes, to help you lead a life of power, purpose, and possibility on your own terms.
Join our community of like-minded individuals. Hit subscribe now, and let's be unleashed and unstoppable together. Hey, high achievers and wily leaders. How are you? I'm here today without my co-host, Alex Leanne. She is in mommy mode today, and thank goodness for that, right? She's got some upcoming things that you're definitely going to want to know about, including a children's book. She's got some amazing projects going on. So let's wish her well today. And we're going to dive into an amazing story, if you will, or stories today with our guest expert. He's the award-winning author, Erik with a K, Foge, F-O-G-E, and Foge. Okay, Foge. I'm so glad to know that. Here, I'm putting a French twist on it, right? I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad we're going to be able to dive in and really talk about some unique aspects of neuroscience because of the spy thrillers that you write, the historical fiction that you write. Would you introduce yourself, Erik? And I'd love to hear all about what you're up to.
Well, my name's Erik Foge, like you said. I'm an award-winning author, and those were for the books We Know Your Name and One Way Roads. And I just want to shout out to Orlando because that's my stomping grounds when I was in high school and college. So, hi, Orlando.
Yeah, we're global. We're global here. So we record from anywhere in the world. Alex Leanne actually is a Canadian. And as you know, I live in South America and in Florida, and you're in Arizona right now, right?
Yeah.
Which is amazing. What part of Arizona are you in?
We're in Peoria.
Okay. And give me a little bit of info about your start. I saw on your website that you were at the Capitol building.
Yes. Well, my parents, they knew I always liked history, and I especially liked World War II. And they said one time, they said, "Hey, we heard that you like history." I said, "Yes." Then they said, "Okay, during spring break, you're going to go to Washington, D.C. to learn history, go to the Capitol, et cetera, et cetera." And I said, "So all we're going?" They said, "There's no we, just you and your driver." So like you were bringing up, I saw different places. The museums were fascinating, seeing all the history. But what's really sparked my interest, I went to the Capitol building, and I was only 14. I was a short little squat, probably 4 feet tall, with a backpack, and I'm going back and forth. And this DC cop was staring at me. He says, "What are you doing, kid?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to find the chambers." He said, "You just missed it, you know, 20 times." I said, "Thanks very much." And I turned my back on him, and I looked and I said, "Wow, this is really cool."
Yeah.
He tapped me on my shoulder and says, "Where's your parents?" I said, "Florida." He says, "Florida?" I said, "Yes, the peninsula, southern state." He says, "I know where it is." he says, "But who are you here with?" I said, "Well, my driver, he's getting lunch. I'm supposed to meet him in the lobby in about 30 minutes. He said, "Well, come with me because, just for safety and all that." And he took me underneath the armory, which hardly anyone sees.
Wow.
And it was just fascinating that you already had a building on top, but you never knew what was underneath.
Wow. Wow.
And also from there, I was able to get in the Pentagon, and I was just fascinated with all that people make our democracy important, also world decisions in this one city, which was fascinating.
Yeah. And you mentioned, it felt going on under and seeing that it felt very mysterious and kind of stimulated your interest. And then carry us forward to your story when you were in university. What began to happen there?
Well, right after high school, I met my best friend's dad was a fleet master chief of the Sixth Fleet, and his boss was the admiral of the Sixth Fleet, and his boss was the president of the United States. So I met those individuals, and I thought, wow, this is really freaking cool because you always you see these people on movies, but you hardly see them face to face. And I always tell people they are very intimidating. If they had to go up against Medusa, Medusa would lose.
Okay.
They could give you a blank stare and you're like, ooh, give you the shivers.
Shrink. Okay.
And that gave me, more influence for the books. But
Yeah.
like I said, writing was not my first aspect. I wanted to work for the government. And I was majoring at UCF, Russian history, Russian politics.
Mhm.
And I was approached by a government agency when I was in college. Unfortunately, that didn't work out because my ex-wife, but we don't need to go there. But long story short, that didn't give up my drive. I said, you know what? Why don't I put my fascination about history, government, and time travel and put it all together? And that's when I started writing One Way Roads.
And so One Way Roads was the first book that you wrote,
That's
correct?
correct.
And that
Yes.
was was that the one that won the Global Thriller Award?
Yeah, first place.
Okay, that's amazing. And then you also are now a multiple serial publisher. Is it 4 books in the series?
Yes, 4 books in the Project Pegasus series. Yes, that's correct.
That's right. And the whole series called Project Pegasus. And
Mhm.
so then lead us into the book that came just after One Way Roads.
Well, a lot of my fans says, "Hey, we would like to know more about the main character and his girlfriend, et cetera, et cetera." Of course, as a lazy writer, I say, "Hey, can you guys use your imagination?" And they said, "No." So I wrote the prequel, how he became who he was,
Yeah.
because everyone, it's like Anakin Skywalker. Everyone knows him from Darth Vader when we were growing up
Yeah.
as Star Wars, but you never see his transition
Mhm.
to Darth Vader.
And that one is Everybody Knows Your Name, or
We know your name,
We Know Your Name, right?
right?
I was like, okay, I'm not saying that right, but I know I'm close. I know I'm right there on the tip. We Know Your Name. What an
Mhm.
intriguing title. And then you're doing it as a prequel, you're building the series.
Mhm.
And being that these are spy thrillers and we're primarily focused on neuroscience, there are some positive and negative aspects of our neuroplasticity. And one of the things that I am intrigued by with your writing is where you talk about how you believe that we can be manipulated or controlled through our mental processes, especially in
Mhm.
relationship to, your main character.
That's correct. Well, like I said, in the prequel, I mean, I don't know how many people in your audience have heard about the farm. It's a real location in Virginia, and that's where they teach tradecraft to their operatives. Of course, there's other places, and all that.
Mhm.
But like the military, they break you down and build you up.
Yeah,
In my book, he had a year of training. So, I mean, you're talking about information overload.
yeah.
With all the training and all that, and they teach you, it's like, you can't trust anyone.
Mhm.
Even your coworkers, you don't know who to trust. You
Right.
especially can't trust strangers because if you I hate to say it, if loose lips sink ships,
Mhm.
it could cost his life.
Yeah.
And he's always in conflict because eventually, he finds a girlfriend and she says, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" Of course, she says, "Well, I work for a museum," which that's where they met. But she said, "Well, you're always busy. You're always going away different places." He
Yeah.
says, "Oh yeah, I have to do different curating jobs, this and that, et cetera, et cetera." Well, it's a lie, and he
Mhm.
finds it very difficult, from not telling her the truth.
Yeah.
And we call it, one of his control officers says, "You should not date her." And he said, "Well, I want to. I want to have a normal life like everyone else."
Mm.
And he says, how are you going to explain to her that you're going away all the time? And, I hate to say it, everyone in the military faces the same thing.
Yeah.
Look at Navy SEALs
Yeah.
or, people in the subs or aircraft carriers or whatever.
Yeah.
And I have to go away for 6 months. I mean, that's tough.
hmm That's right. One of my nephews is a ranger, and like you said, I think part of the reason he was chosen for that job is because he never talks at all. You know,
Yeah.
loose lip sync ships. It is really interesting because we talk a lot about our mental perspectives and the thoughts we put on the world and how we create our reality through that. This is more and more verifiable through not only the evidence of people's lives and their actions for millennia, actually, but through quantum science and the things we can see there about how we're all connected. So there's a couple of different aspects here. One is this is a particular world with a particular goal and job in mind, and everybody fits within it and agrees with that perspective to move forward or not. And I know you said your character is a little bit flawed. Does he have any flaws in that area, or is he all in on the perspective of this agency that he's working with?
Well, I try to make him believable because, like I said, we know your name. I only talk about maybe 2, 3 missions that he actually does. And one mission, they said, okay, you have to go to Russia and you have to put C4 in a submarine to sink it because they're going to sell it to the North Koreans. And of course, he says, okay, what's my cover? Am I going to work for, going there as a curator, as a museum, whatever? And one of his section chiefs says, no, you're just going to go in. And the guy's like, I need a cover. If I don't have a cover, someone's going to raise a red flag. Like, why is this guy here?
Yeah.
And he speaks against authority.
Yeah.
And one part,
that's not done. Yeah.
And he always does that. And like I said, his control officer always says, I'm always getting you out of trouble because you're always speaking your mind.
Mhm.
And also later on in the book, the director of intelligence says, how do you feel when you come to work?
Yeah.
And he says, I feel unappreciated. And he says, well, why do you feel unappreciated? And he says, well, most people in my position are special ops like SEALs, Rangers, or whatever, or they went to Ivy League schools.
Yeah.
And they will look at me differently because I don't fit their norm.
Mm.
And if I got with the agency, they might look at me and say, how in the hell did you get here? You went to UCF, which is not an Ivy League school.
Yeah.
Back in 97. I mean, it's still not, but it's still a good school in my opinion.
So your character is based on you then?
Loosely based on me, yes.
Yeah. And go ahead.
No, what were we going to say? Go ahead.
I just find it very interesting because not only are they expected to follow orders without question, and I understand the logic and the reasoning there, certainly, but the fact that, even what I would consider as a civilian, the mildest speaking up and using my voice, even saying I'm unappreciated and how that can be viewed. It's interesting because not only is he isolated in his job, but he's further isolated by these other differentiating factors, like not having gone to an Ivy League school. So you probably had a lot of fun basing this loosely off yourself and doing the research around this as well.
Yes.
And
well, people always ask me, it's like, why did you, I remember someone was reading the book and they were saying, well, this guy likes history, he's sarcastic, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, yeah, the guy, he's based on a real person. The guy's a real jerk. I was hoping the person would pick up and laugh and realize it was me. They didn't pick up. And they said, well, why would you call him a jerk? I said, he's me. I'm in the book. I mean, Ian Fleming put himself sort of in James Bond too.
Yeah.
Because he made James Bond smoke the same cigarette brand as he did and the same type of drinks. So I hate to say it, authors for some part, put themselves in characters.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, that's something I think that's so powerful because your creativity is flowing from who you are. We talk a lot about identity on here and doing things from a foundation of really knowing who you are. And I think that's incredibly important. Now, do you have another book in the works right now? I know you published two books together.
Correct. Books 3 and 4. And yes, I am currently working on a book about soulmates.
Ooh, interesting. Okay. And will it be in the series or is it separate?
It's going to be separate
Okay.
because I'll give you a little summary about it. Basically, it deals with an aristocratic, you know, gentleman. He's in his 20s, and it takes place during the late Victorian era. And if people don't realize, back in the Victorian era, you had to marry in your class system. It
Yeah.
was very taboo. You couldn't marry down, et cetera, et cetera. You had to marry in your station, as they would say. And he falls in love with a girl that is below his station.
Mm.
And a couple chapters in, you find out, she gets killed. And he makes a promise to her, it's like he will not love anyone except her. Of
Wow.
course, she says, "Do you promise?" And naturally, he says, "Yes." And she says, "I'll come back for you." And what I'll leave as this: she does get reincarnated every once in a great while, but he stays the same age. And when she gets reincarnated, God, fate, or where it might be out there, is trying to give them another chance because they didn't have it the first time. So,
Oh, that sounds super interesting. Wow,
so
how
basically, it goes
intriguing.
from 1877 to 1985. That's the time span of the book.
It makes me think of Jane Austen, how they were dealing with that class issue. And
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like so interesting. I understand that you became in the process as a creative, a master storyteller. What did that look like and how has that evolved?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. I took creative writing class in high school and college, and both of my teachers says, "You're lousy. You're no good.
Wow.
Who's going to read this crap?" And
Wow.
I always say, people, teachers can either make or break someone.
Yeah.
Someone that has a weak, I don't know, say self-esteem could say,
Mm,
"You're right. Only give up writing. I'm not going to do it." I'm
yeah.
the type of person that says, "You know what? You don't think I am? I'm going to prove you wrong."
Yeah. There you go. And quite often I find, I don't know if you found this as well, Eric, that our greatest strengths can also, it's like we're going down the middle of a river. And if you go to the right, it's your greatest strengths, or it could be your left. But in this reference, you go to the right, it's your greatest strength, but you can easily go to the left, and the same gift can be one of your greatest dysfunctions. Have you found that?
Mhm. Well, I would just say it's like a labyrinth for me for writing.
Okay.
When you look at a labyrinth, I would say majority of people say, "Oh my God, this is huge. There's no way I'm going to be able to solve this
Yeah.
maze."
Yeah.
So you're going as a writer. I went quarter away, and I'm thinking, "Wow, I wrote some. I'm doing good." Some writers might say, "Well, this is too much. I don't think I can go on," so they leave or give up. So I said, "I'm gonna go another quarter and see what I got." So you got halfway, and you're like, "Halfway, yay!"
Yeah.
And then you realize, "Oh my gosh, I still have to write more to finish." And like I said, more people quit on the way.
Yeah.
And when you get three-quarters of the way, you're almost exhausted because it took me 10 years to write one-way roads. I'm like,
Okay.
it's like, wow, I don't know if I can continue. And I said, "You know what? I can forget it. I'm going to keep on going." And when I finished, I was excited. Then the hard work comes, trying to get published.
Yeah.
And of course, you said I had a 4-book series. Guess what? I had 3 more labyrinths to go.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I know that your fans are great, and I have a feeling quite a few of our audience are, if you love historical fiction, if you love intrigue and thrillers, these books are definitely going to meet the niche, right? But it's
Yeah.
leaning into that consistency. You were patient, but you continued the process. And now you're starting to see the results. 10 years is a long time to write a story, but it was that step by step. You were also working another job at that time as well, correct?
Yeah, yeah, I was doing corporate America and writing in the evening. All,
Yeah.
I did my own research and everything. Of course, I got, from my own personal experiences, the people I met, and, put that in the book.
Wow. Now, I want to ask you, do you feel like we are currently being manipulated and controlled? Do you see that?
I would say, I know that we live in the greatest country in the world. Does America have flaws? Absolutely. Every country does.
Yeah.
So you can't say there's a perfect country.
Mm.
But George Carlin, I forgot what year it was, he was talking to someone, just like how we are. He says, "Do you realize there's only 3 or 4 publications that control our media?"
Mm.
And they said, "Oh, that's not true." He says, "Well, like for example, the Wall Street Journal, this magazine, et cetera, they're owned by this family or whoever." And if you look at the news agencies, when you and I were growing up, of course, when we date ourselves, Dan Rather told us the who, what, where, and when. And we
Yeah.
came up with our own opinion. But now it's so polarized.
Mm.
We all know CNN is more of a Democratic slant. Fox News is more of the Republican slant.
Yeah.
And they just focus on their individuals who believe in that. So,
Yeah.
like you saying, are we being manipulated? I say yes, because you're not getting the full story.
Yeah.
Because if you look at Time Life magazine or Newsweek, the articles are almost identical,
Yeah.
and you're not getting the author's real expression, or they're probably being told exactly what to write or what not to put in their stories.
Yes. And it's often based on sponsorship as well, who's sponsoring
Mm-hmm.
the agency. And I think this is such an important point to bring up because as more and more has come about in terms of our neuroplasticity, the neuroscience is a relatively new science, but it's growing by leaps and bounds. And it's important for us to understand that there are actual tools that we have available to us. We have inherent power to control and create our reality, to manifest our reality to some degree, right? And maybe to a greater degree than we can even imagine. I know
Mm-hmm.
you and I were talking before we hit the record button and talking about those who have maintained their vision and the pieces of them that could not be taken in certain situations, such as Nelson Mandela, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Viktor Frankl, who wrote A Man's Search for Meaning, a classic book. And you mentioned Shawshank Redemption, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did.
And I think another movie as well.
Oh, I'm trying to recall. Geez,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I would say Shawshank is the easiest because, like I said, Andy Dufresne was put in isolation for I think 2 months, and everyone thought he was going to break.
Yeah.
And when he came out, people said, that was probably the hardest time I ever spent. He said, no, I said, I had Mozart in my head, or he listened to Mozart, and they said, oh, they gave you the record player. He said, no, Mozart wasn't back in my mind.
Yeah.
And he says they can't touch certain places,
Right.
and one of mine was hope.
Mhm.
Of course, Morgan Freeman's character says, that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
Hope, but guess what? That kept Andy keep on going.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'll shout out Dr. Joe Dispenza. He talks about hope from the aspect of lacking. I hope that I can have a good life. I hope that my kids can get into a good school. I hope that I'll have a great retirement from a place of not having or of scarcity. But hope is a multifaceted word and it's used, and it can also be used for the positive in that my hope is that, I have the hope that the vision and the goal that I have is real. And you're somebody who really exemplifies that in that you believed that you could be an author, and you
Hmm.
took the steps to start writing on the side while you're working in corporate America and continue to do so, where now you've got a series that's going to be 7 books, currently 4 books, award-winning author, and you've got this new, relationship-based book coming out about,
Hmm.
um, our soul connections. And tell me the name of that again.
Serendipity Promise.
Serendipity Promise. Okay. And have you thought about doing any kind of films with your books? Is that something that you've let enter in?
I was interviewed with Magic Image Hollywood Magazine, which is the second most popular magazine in Hollywood. And that was one of the questions they asked me. And I said, I would love it to be on a streaming service because I always tell people, think of your favorite movie. You only can do so much in 2 hours, but imagine what you could do in 8 1 hour episodes.
That's right.
A- And I'm right now, I am networking with anyone and everyone who would be willing to listen to me.
Okay.
And I met a couple days ago, I met a drummer from Lenny Kravitz.
Yes.
I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who Lenny Kravitz was until a couple days ago.
And Jimi Hendrix as well, correct?
I think so.
Yeah.
And he took an interest in my books, and I went, "Wow, this is really cool."
Yeah.
And, it's not just a friend or whoever.
Yeah.
And I remember he and I spoke on the phone briefly yesterday, and I sent him my treatments. He said, "Well, this definitely needs to be made into a series." And he was funny. He says, "Hey, maybe I can do the music." I said, "Well, you read my mind because I was thinking the same thing." I said, "Well, maybe with your connections,
Yeah.
let's make each other's dreams come true." And
Yeah,
I,
that's right.
and I always, like you said, you say, "Well, I hope to have this. I hope to this," but now I hate to say it, I'm going to say, "No, I will, and I want that. I want to make this happen."
Yes. Yeah.
Because and I always tell people, if when you're writing books, the people are not going to come to you. You're going to have to network and network. Is it hard work? Absolutely. I always joke and say that's why I have gray hair. And but I
Gray's
don't
a
know
good
where.
color.
Yeah, nah. But I don't know where it's going to lead. I mean, who knows? Maybe in 6 months he says, "Hey, we found Tom Hanks. He's interested." Would I be excited? Absolutely, hands down.
Yeah.
But as they say, you got to take baby steps before you walk, and you got to walk before you run.
Oh, we've
And
got to get you into the Easy Way network for sure.
I would love
We're
that.
we're on Easy Way TV, and we're a part of the podcasting Easy Way podcasting network. And there are so many authors and producers and actors in the group. It would be a great place for you to move forward. The streaming service sounds amazing. The series where you can sit down and just really dive in. And are you a binge watcher?
Depends on the show.
Okay. Yeah.
My wife and I just finished watching Discovery of Witches,
Okay.
and that was such a compelling story. And once again, guess what? It was based on 3 books.
Yeah. Yeah. Squid Games is a new one that is a thriller. Have you seen that?
I saw
Uh,
the first season. I haven't seen the second season yet.
yeah, it's psychological
Oh yeah.
Korean drama. Yeah. So I know that, there's some series out there. And so the aspect that you bring in that I also really appreciate is the time travel. And, how did that thought process develop?
Well, I'm gonna date myself. Like I said, I always do. I always liked time travel. Like I enjoyed watching Star Trek, and one of the episodes was "The City on Edge of Forever." I think it was called,
Mhm.
about McCoy going back, changing history, and it was for the worse because the Germans win World War II. Therefore, the Enterprise didn't exist, so they had to prevent him from doing that.
Okay.
Another movie I enjoyed was The Final Countdown, with the aircraft carrier the Nimitz going back the day before Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And I always like the moral dilemma that in the stories, all the characters know, should we do this? But we do this will happen, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And you're bringing up time travel. That's with one way roads. I remember my publisher said he couldn't put down my book And before he offered me a contract, he said, I got to ask you one question. I said, go ahead. He says, what the hell were you thinking about saving Hitler's life in one-way roads? I said, well, so many books and movies have it where he dies, everything goes back to normal. What happens if it gets worse? And for the main character already being back in time, that would be a big moral dilemma because everyone in their right mind said, oh yeah, you'll kill him. But if it causes the Germans to get the atomic bomb and using it, now the character's in a moral dilemma. Should I let the Germans get it, or should I let the worst person in history alive? So,
Oh man, if you think about, shaping a reality or having a perspective on things, on life, and that catch-22, that moral
yeah,
dilemma that I know we mentioned on movie reviews and more the other night, that
yes,
it's interesting, right, to think about, um, what that might look like coming at it with the neuroscience tools that Alex and I teach of being able to create a reality. So what immediately comes into my mind is going back to vision. What is my vision when I come up and I face this crossroads? As many of us face crossroads in life.
every
Which way
single
do I
day.
go? Yeah, very much so. And being able to know the goal of what you're wanting to create, I believe is a huge help in, knowing which one might fit that parameter more. And it's an interesting mental process for sure.
If you want to amplify your reach, visibility, and generate more sales leads, joint venture partners, and increase your bottom line by one simple login, then EasyWay Network is your solution to greatness. Our all-in-one marketing solutions hub can help boost your event, podcast, and increase your relationship equity by the click of a button. What are you waiting for? EasyWayNetwork.com.
Because we're talking about a mental process. I remember watching an interview with Matt Damon, and I was fascinated because the host says, "How did being rich and famous, change you?" And I believe Matt is from Boston. He's a good Boston boy, and he likes the Celtics or wherever teams are there. And he says, "I haven't changed. Everyone else around me has changed." And believe it or not, so my true friends know I'm not going to change. But some people say, well, when you become a world famous author and your books are made into movies or shows, wherever, how will you change?
Yeah,
I'm not. I said, I'm still going to be sarcastic to you. I will still like history. I probably still drive my car that I'm driving now, which is
yeah,
10 years old,
yeah,
because I'm not going to change. But
yeah,
like Matt said, everyone else around me has changed. And the funny thing is, my publisher actually told me that once you become one of your first book is published, much less four, people are going to treat you differently,
right.
and
Yeah,
they do.
it's interesting. It is very interesting. Or, depending on what their perceptions of you are, whether you have something, whether you can, you know, feed them quite often. It really leans into one of the principles of wealth I teach, which is money magnifies who you already are.
My wife
So
says that.
yeah, it's it, and so who you are is exactly what you're talking about. I'm still going to like history. I'm still going to be who I am. You're still going to be telling the jokes you like to tell
Mhm.
and living the life you want to live. And it's one of the things that is so important to realize because we can easily give everything away or lose everything or be miserable when we have received some kind of abundance or wealth in our lives if we're not doing the work to change those things along the way so that they're getting magnified, right? And being able to become more intimate with ourselves is reflected in the energy of the money we have. So, yeah, this is, I could go on for days.
It's okay. Well, the
But
funny thing is, I remember my financial advisor. He put it so right. He says the funny thing is, a person in a three-piece suit comes in, and you might think, oh, they're probably worth millions of dollars, but they're really not. They
yeah,
don't have two pennies to rub. But a guy comes in a t-shirt, blue jeans, and worn out shoes, and you're looking at this guy. Do you belong here? But you don't say that. I mean, you're
yeah,
thinking that. And they sit down and say, oh, here's my portfolio. I'd like to go to your company. And guess what? It's worth millions.
right.
So don't judge a book by its cover.
It's so true. I definitely found that growing up. I was working in a dining room with the chef for like presidents of banks and companies that were in this downtown area. And the first thing she said, she cooked in silk dresses, and she said, "You're going to know right away who," at that time, she referred to them as social climbers, which may date us. You're going to know right away who those are, and right away the ones who have true wealth. And she was spot on about that, exactly what you were just saying, that it's those who don't have to prove themselves don't have to prove themselves, and they're living in the satisfaction and fulfillment of what they want, rather than the stress and the heart being magnified with the things that we don't want magnified, right?
Yeah. Like I said, I treat everyone the same with
Yeah,
respect unless you prove yourself otherwise.
yeah,
I remember the first time my wife and I came to Arizona, it was on a business trip with her. And these people were, vice presidents or very successful salespeople and all that. And the sad thing is, they treated some of this people, all of this, I don't want to say hostess or whatever, but they were treating them like, oh, go away. You're just here to get me my drink and da da da.
yeah.
And I became friends with one of them over, a few days. And I walked in for lunch. I had shorts on, just came from back from a walk. And he said, "Hey, Eric, how you doing?" I said, "Okay." I said, "I forgot. Do you guys have sweet tea here?" He said, "No, Eric, we don't." I said, "Okay." He says, "We have Coca-Cola. You want Coke?" I went, "Yeah, that'd be great." And I said, "Well, can you bring Diet Coke for my girlfriend?" She was my girlfriend back then. He said, "I will do that." And he said, "Where are you sitting?" I said, "Well, I'm sitting right over there." So a couple minutes later, he came with two empty glasses of ice and gave me two Cokes and my wife two Diet Cokes. And these, people around us like, how's that possible? They only said, water and unsweet tea. Of course, I sounded like a little egoistic. I said, I know people. But I mean, I mean, I don't be nice to people because I, want something from them. I think it's the
Yeah.
right thing to do.
It's something that is so important when you start to recognize that we're all valuable souls on this planet. One of the examples that I love to use is, we don't look at a baby in a crib or even a puppy or a kitten typically and go, ah, sorry, kid, you're not valuable. You're not doing anything yet. No, we look at a baby and inherently we know that they arrived on the planet with value. And we forget that as we're growing up and along the way with all the messages we get, and lose that in many cases. But one of the most important things we can do, I believe, is to recognize our own value and worth, and coming from that place of having our oxygen mask on first, then able to share it with other people, and to be able to have our cups overflow, if you will, with helping everybody to know that it's not a matter of income, abundance, status. It's a matter that you're here on this earth, that makes you valuable. you
Mhm.
know I love that. And
And
yeah, I wanted to just finalize with you, walking us just a little bit more through the series,
okay.
why you published two books, and then we can wrap up with how people can get a hold of you.
Well, like I said, when I was writing One Way Roads, I had fans that, hey, write the prequel. I always already had in mind for a the second book, which was eventually going to be the third book, which was, you know, Horizons Without Boundaries. And once again, it deals with time travel back to World War II, and the main character has to solve two problems this time. He has to save JFK when he was a young lieutenant,
Wow.
and also prevent the Germans from winning the Battle of Britain. So I was in corporate America, like I said. We were in Arizona. I was married to my lovely wife, Christina. And so I'm writing after work every time, and I put in my 2 week notice because she says she got to a place where I can write full time and market my books full time. So within one day, within that 2 weeks, I woke up around 3:30, and she said, "Is anything wrong?" I said, "I have an idea for book 4." She says, "You haven't finished book 3 yet." I said, "I know, but I have an idea." So she says, "Okay." She knows not to question when my juices are flowing and everything. So after the day after I quit my job, I started writing book 4 and put book 3 on hold. It took me 14 months to finish the first draft, and that deals with the Germans finding out about D-Day, and the main character has to find where that went haywire so he can fix the timeline. Then after that, I went back to book 3 and finished that. That's why they came out at the same time.
I love that. I love that. That really speaks to the freedom that you have as a creative, as an author, being able to write and having the insight from a dream, and doing it your way and publishing both at the same time because it's, this one, and it's a continued storyline.
Yeah.
I love that so much. And I just want to thank you for being here. We
Oh, you're very welcome.
talked about some amazing things. We touched on, perspective, identity, what we can do to recognize where we're not being manipulated and controlled. We talked about the incredible way that these books came about for you. They unfolded through your visit to the Capitol building, and then you went into Russian history and politics. We'll have to have you on again to talk more about what sparked that. And then, finding out more through the contacts you made about one of the agencies that is in this country, and also meeting, the sixth admiral and the president, as well as your friend's boss that the sixth admiral was over, and just all of these experiences that have shaped you becoming this amazing storyteller, also proving yourself, right? Proving that, yeah, nobody tells me I'm not good at it.
Well, I'll tell your viewers this: when I sell my book, "We Know Your Name," I always put a quote in there. It's the same quote for everyone. I always tell people this, and they can like this. Before you leave, make sure they fear and respect you. So
That I would love to dive into that. Like, tell me more about that, and I think of that. I don't think of that in terms of being a woman. I think in terms of power in a different way than generally a man thinks of power, being more from the top down. And whereas I think more of power of being a connection, the collaborative process. So that's interesting.
Well, I always say a woman can be just as powerful as a man. Like, for example, my strengths is creativity. My wife runs the business side of my company. She has the business mind. So that's a nice partnership where everything comes together like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I really love that. And it's been so lovely to have you. We talked about so many other things. I can't wait until you, my friend listening right now, share your feedback on what you gained from today, and getting excited to jump into these books, right? And really enjoying these. So how can we get a hold of your books, Erik?
Well, they are on Amazon, and people might say, well, what book comes first and all that. They'll say 1 of 4, 2 of 4, so you'll know the order they come in. Also, if you want to reach out to me on social media, from LinkedIn to Facebook, Instagram, where they can follow me, is my first name, Erik, last name is Foge. So don't put a C, because you will never find me.
Erik Foge.
Yeah, Foge.
Foge. Okay,
Yeah.
Erik Foge. And thank you for being here. Thanks for sharing with us. And I'm really excited to see your books as they continue to rise. And, we dive in and have a little intrigue in our lives.
Also, like I said, they can go to my website, which is my first and last name.com.
Okay.
And they can actually, there's a page that says a concept for each of the books, so they'll find out how my mind works a little.
Okay, I love that. That's a great idea. I didn't see that when I visited your page. I'm going to go and check that out here as soon as we get off. And
mind exploding.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, there we go. You're speaking my language, right?
We're connecting.
That's right. That's right. And I really look forward to meeting your wife one of these days. And thank you again for being here. Thank you for your insights and your wisdom and this incredible creative process that is going on. And look forward to putting you out there so that our viewers can know where to go to get these amazing books. Have a good day.
It's been a pleasure. You too.
Ciao for now.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Unleashed Unstoppable podcast with your hosts, Alexandra Carter and Carol Register.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review, and subscribe.
That's all for this episode, Wildly Ambitious Leaders. See you next week.